Get the pro treatment and design your very own custom Rawlings glove, just like your favorite big league stars. Choose from countless patterns, web types, lace colors, and more to showcase your unique personal style. Start with a pro design and change it up with your team colors, or build yours completely from scratch with your name, number, and state flag. Visit Rawlings.com to design your custom glove today. Welcome to the Base Path Podcast, brought to you by New England Baseball Journal. I'm your host, Dan Guttenplan. I am here with Pat Donnelly, who's been on the MIAA. Got to say that one slowly. You've been on that beat all season. So we're going to kind of catch up on the way things have been going over the first 2 weeks, trends, guys that have really stood out. We've got a couple no-hitters for us, one pitcher, 4 straight games with home runs from another player. So there's a lot to kind of go through here. And definitely kind of go through some of the stuff you've been covering. So let's start with just, I know you do the power rankings every week, and this week it really jumped out to me. The first top 3 teams are all public schools. It's Taunton, Franklin, and Braintree. What's kind of jumped out to you in the last 2 weeks at the start of the season here?
Yeah, I didn't give Taunton enough credit coming into the year. I think I had them in the hunt. I didn't have them in the top 10, and then they jump out to a 3-0 start. Now they're 6-0, and they're kind of, running away with the top of the power rankings right now. And, you look at guys who came back, like a Joey Benoit and Eddie Travers and Aiden Twig, Jeremy Neef. It's been for all that they lost last year, and that was kind of why I kind of slept on them, I guess, where, they if memory serves, was pretty big senior class that they graduated. But just that next wave, you was an 8-7 win over Franklin. You blow by Stoughton and Durfee. Just the fact that they've been able to keep it going. And Franklin was one of the better stories of last season, where they started off kind of slow and mid-season got caught fire and made a deep run into the playoffs. And, kind of a youngish group there. And with a lot of guys coming back, it's just kind of carrying over, whether it's Ethan Edmonds, who is a freshman this year, having a great start, but you got a Jack Sullivan or Sean Kryzak or Owen Panini guys stepping up. So they're kind of continuing the momentum from last year, and Braintree is always in it, as we know. And even Franklin and Taunton are always in it too. But you got Peter Brooks, Luke Joyce, Max King, guys who have been kind of at the forefront of things for them, especially last season down the stretch, kind of carrying over into this year.
Yeah, Luke Joyce, he was on the mound in that state championship game against, who was the kid from Chelmsford that's at Gardner Webb now? Matt Stewart. Yeah. They had a great, they both pitched really well in that championship game, and it was a great close to the season. Taunton and Franklin, like they were in the state championship game 2 years in a row, I think in like 2022 and 2023. And what do you think is different about those Hockomock schools? We had both Blair Bork, who's a Taunton coach, and Zach Brown is a Franklin coach, obviously. We've had them on the podcast, and they kind of talk about forming that feeder system, at that the little league level, and you having guys stick around and go to the public high schools, which is a little different now because we've seen the more of the prep school route, with guys trying to kind of buy some time to get those college scholarship offers, or even just offers to play if it's not a scholarship. What do you think kind of separates those Hockomock schools, Taunton, Franklin?
Yeah, I would echo the same things that, I'm sure they've said at a lot of other forums, where, you just have that, like we just said, they're always in the mix. And so they're always, I guess, visible to kids in the town. They're always known to be good, and it's kids probably see that I want to play for my hometown team, I want to win a state championship for my hometown team, as opposed to going off to X private school that might be nearby. I think that's probably got to be the biggest part of it. And you get Zach Brown and Blair Bork, established coaches, they've been there for a while, so it's guys you probably want to go play for, you want to be part of that culture. So I think it's just all of those things just add up, and kids in the town see that.
Yeah, and I think it's the same with Braintree with Billy O'Connell.
Yep.
He's so involved in every aspect of the game. Like, he's the head coach of Team Massachusetts, so he's kind of got his finger on the pulse of who all the great players are in the area and who the best 18 to 20 guys are in the class of 2027 right now. He's got a couple 2028s on that squad. He's really involved with the Mass State Coaches Association. He just really wants to grow the game. And I think once you establish that culture where, hey, you know, Braintree, we're going to be tough every year. We're going to make deep runs into the tournament. Guys are going to stick around and go to our public high school. We're going to have a good feeder system. We're going to get the Little League programs involved. You know, Babe Ruth is even good in that area. It's like, once you kind of establish it, you know, as long as the head coach stays, and which Billy O'Connell has, I think that's how a program really sustains success over a long period of time.
Yeah, it's that consistency. Like whether it's the coach, whether it's the success, it's all of those things just kind of adding up for just a perfect storm for those towns.
Yeah. Speaking of sustained success, we've got a lot of those programs in the Catholic Conference. St. John Shrewsbury has been in the mix for the last few years, a couple of state championship game appearances at the Division I level. St. John's Prep, always very tough. Catholic Memorial's kind of back this year. They had when Nick Dorito was there, he ended up going to UMass Lowell a few years ago. They were kind of making some noise in the Catholic Conference. They've had a couple of down years, and now, not necessarily down years, but now they're back as a state championship contender. You actually saw them yesterday, right? Or this
last week?
Last week, that was. BC High again in the mix. They seem to kind of always be challenging for state championships. And then Xaverian, you know, they won a state championship. I think that was that first pandemic year, 2020, you know, during that COVID outbreak. Or no, because everybody shut down that year. It must have been 2021. But how do you see, like, the one thing I noticed is St. John Shrewsbury, which probably, you know, arguably has the best roster of any of those Catholic Conference schools. They already have 2 losses. Everybody else, St. John's Prep, Catholic Memorial, BC High, Xaverian, they've already all lost once. How do you think that will affect? We haven't had the MIAA seeding come out yet. I don't know when that happens, about maybe halfway through the season. How do you think it will affect MIAA seeding once if these Catholic Conference teams continue to beat up on each other?
I think what bodes well for them is just the strength of schedule, and opponent rating still plays a big factor in, you know, the overall rating for the power rankings. So especially where they're playing each other early, and it's a deep conference already early. And even a BC High and a St. John Shrewsbury, and you know, a lot of these teams have strong schedules out of the conference too. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, where, you know, every year there always seems to be one of these, you know, kind of teams, whether it's the Catholic Conference, the Bay State, the Hockomock, that, you know, the record might not jump off the page, but their strength of schedule is pretty nuts, and they're usually high in the rankings. So that's the way I kind of would see it shaking out. Like, you know, BC High, Xaverian, CM, SJP, St. John Shrewsbury, and, you know, MC's even in there 3 and 4, although they've struggled in those Catholic Conference games early. But like those first 5 teams, I could see an argument for all of them being in the top 15. And one, like, and they're all, like, whether it's beating up on each other, and even St. John Shrewsbury, where just recently we were like, oh, maybe, you know, slower start to the year. Is it anything to be worried about? And it's like, no, it's early, and they've had 2 get right games already. They smoked, I think it was Westboro and then MC, both double-digit runs, and it was, you know, oh, so yep, back on track.
Yeah, they're right there again. And like even if they get 5 in the top 15 in Division I don't know who's going to want to play a Catholic Conference team that's ranked number 15. You know, that's going to be a tough out.
That's the thing. Like, even, you know, St. John's Prep, which had a lot of question marks for me, just again with the seniors they graduated and a lot of new faces kind of taking over big roles. It's been seamless this year. And CM, which is kind of, you know, a team that I've kind of been optimistic on going into the last few seasons, and it hasn't really translated, but it's translating to start this year, whether it's, you know, Liam McKinney or Daniel Colon or Rocky Vankowski. Those guys are having great starts to the season. And, you know, Xaverian's always there. BC High, which was, you know, maybe took a little step back last year. You know, Andrew Flaherty missed the year with an injury, but another one with a massive senior class that came back. Same thing with St. John Shrewsbury. So many seniors that came back, where it's just, again, everything's kind of shaken out all in their favor right now, and I'm sure they're just going to keep beating up on each other.
Yeah, I talked to Coach Leahy from BC High before the season, I remember, and he was adamant St. John Shrewsbury is the team to beat. And, you know, that could be kind of the, you know, gamesmanship in the beginning. They're like, put the pressure on them. We don't want to be considered the favorite. But, you know, they are, like I said, they have 2 losses. But as you're saying, they're kind of getting right this week and starting to kind of take care of business. So they could be a team that really take off here in the next couple of weeks. Walpole, I wanted to ask you about them. They're a defending state champion. They won Division II last year, and they've gotten 2 no-hitters from Luca DiGiulio. Is that DiGiulio?
I believe so.
Yeah. So where did he come from? Was he a big part of that championship team last year? Or, you know, I can't remember another instance where a guy starts an MIAA season with 2 no-hitters.
Yeah, you know, pretty crazy. No-hitter against Framingham. Struck out 6 in that one. And he's gotten it done at the plate with 3 RBI a day. You know, they're a team that, again, you know, it's always tough coming into the season, where it's been like, you know, 9 months since we've talked about these teams or whatever it is. And, you know, it was another team where, you know, you look at who they graduated. There was a Mike St. Martin and, you know, that senior class. And it's like, kind of, okay, let's see what they are to start the year. And here they are, 5-0. Luca DiGiulio is going crazy. Shane Harrington, who was a big factor in that run, he's had a great start to the year. And they've had some younger guys stepping up too. So it's a credit to Chris Costello for the work he's done there.
Yeah, and it's difficult in the beginning of the year when you do the first power rankings, like I do them with the prep schools, and you get these lower division, like, you know, sometimes in prep, you'll overlook like a Fairchester Athletic Association or even the independents, like Austin Prep always seems to fall a little bit lower than they should in the beginning because you're like, I don't know, they're not really in a conference or a league. Walpole as a Division II team, they're going to be the type of school that's really, it looks like we probably should have opened with this. It looks like there's going to be a Super 8 for baseball starting next year, 2027. Yeah. So Walpole's the type of team that really could benefit from that because as a Division II team, they're going to be in that mix with those Division I. Like I think this week in their power rankings, they were up to 8. You know, 8 teams getting the Super 8. So they're a team that could really make some noise for an overall Super 8 championship, even as a Division II school.
Yeah, it's Walpole's in that mix. You know, the last few years, St. Mary's might have been in that mix. Yeah. And Lynn, not anymore now that they've moved to Division I, but Plymouth North would have been right there as well. You know, those kind of usual suspects across, you know, D2 and D3. Even like maybe even a North Reading or a Pittsfield. I know they both had great seasons last year. And, you know, it's always interesting just to see when the MIAA's power rankings come out, just, you know, for our own exercises. Well, obviously we'll be doing it for real next year, but, you know, I always like to, in hockey and soccer with the other sports I cover, taking the top teams in each division and seeing where they would rack up, like overall, take out the divisions and what the Super 8 or, you know, top 10 would be. And it's always interesting to see, like, if a North Reading in D4, you know, I think the last few years, like Hamilton Wenham has been a power in D4 or D5 in baseball. And, you know, you get those teams, where would they stack up against everyone else with their rating?
Yeah, Austin Prep used to give us a hard time with that. Not that any representative from the school, but just trying to figure out how to rank them because you were like, they were Division III in the MIAA before they moved to NEPSAC. And now over the last like 4 or 5 years in NEPSAC, they're winning 20 games a year. Right now they're up to number 2, I think, in the coaches poll. So we never knew what to do with them when they were D3 and there was no Super 8. So, but obviously they deserve to be in that mix. They won a state championship, I want to say like 2021 as a Division III school. And I think we ended up putting them number 1 overall at the end of that year. And they've kind of proven they deserve to be in that mix, just the way they performed in the transition of the NEPSAC. Lincoln-Sudbury also has a player who has an outstanding, kind of crazy statistical performance. Who is that?
Yeah, Luke Danielson has home runs in 4 straight games. And I think the craziest thing there is he's not the only guy who's having an awesome start to the season. You know, they've hung up some big offensive numbers throughout. I think that his 4th straight home run came in it was like a 15-9 loss to BC High. So they played well enough to win. They just haven't to give up 15 runs.
Yeah.
But like a Drew Blanchette or a Ben Clarkin, Mason Tarantino, like that, those guys are all having insane starts to the year. You know, Lincoln-Sudbury was a 7-5 loss to Newton North in their opener. That was a 13-3 win, 9-6 win, then a 15-9 loss. Like the offense is clicking on all cylinders. And yeah, Luke Danielson, again, whether it's 2 straight no-hitters, home runs in 4 straight, it's kind of crazy to be. And usually like early in the year is when you're thinking offenses get going. But I don't know, like we can maybe get into this a little later, but one of the things I've noticed is how, you know, the big offensive outputs we've already seen this year. Usually I feel at least the last 2 years for me, it's kind of felt like the opposite.
No, I think you're right. Like cold weather is typically, you know, favors the pitchers because like you're jamming people on their hands and they, you know, they don't want their hands to sting. And then I remember, like, I'm a Philadelphia Phillies fan. Charlie Manuel, when he was a manager, always used to say, first 90-degree day, he'd be like, oh, it's hitting season. We're going to hit today, So, yeah, you want those warm temperatures when you're in the batter's box, and maybe on the mound, you want it cold. You want to get the ball in on the guy's hands and kind of make them think about, whether they want to swing. Plymouth North, I wanted to talk about. You mentioned them moving divisions, but they have been as consistent as just about any, public school program or any program in the MIAA over the last, 3-4 years with Coach Dwayne Follett. What do you attribute their run of success to? Because it's different, different players over the last few years too.
Yeah, I think it's, a lot of these public schools, I think it's, I'm not in the weeds every day down there, but I feel like it's got to be a similar thing as a Taunton, a Franklin, a Braintree, or, go on down the list where it's just, you get the right coach there, you get the right mix, and it's, obviously there's something going on with the culture where, 2 years ago, we're talking about DC Brown. Now the last 2 years, we're talking about Danny Kenny. We're going to be talking about Reese Adair and Connor McLeish. And, I think it's just the ability to kind of get guys, whether it's starting them on JV and developing them, or, kind of have that feeder system from whether it's kids in Little League who see all the success and say, you know what, I want to play there. I want to stay instead of going to, private school X. I think it's all of those things just add up. And you look at a guy like Danny Kenny, who's had 20 strikeouts and 2 starts and a sub-1 ERA, or, Brandon Higgins, Reese Adair, I mentioned Connor McLeish, like all those guys who once upon a time, last year kind of coming into their own and now all stepping up.
Yeah, you mentioned the development piece, and that's something we don't really talk about that much, but just because it always feels to me that this spring season, starts first week of April and it's over by the, first or the end of May for a lot of teams if you don't make the tournament. So you're like, how much development could there possibly be in those 2 months? But talking to coaches, that is a great time for development because, unlike the summer where you're just traveling to tournaments and a showcase event, in the spring, you get, 3-4 practices a week where, you're going to have 2 or 3 games a week, but you're also going to have 2 or 3 other days that you fill with practices, and you're working on, your swing, or you're out in the field working on mechanics, or working on situational stuff. So it is a great time of year for development. So that, like you say, that could be a big reason programs like Plymouth North, Braintree, Taunton, Franklin, that player development is a huge piece, and their JV and freshman programs are always very strong too.
Yeah, and even when we get into the summer, and you're obviously on the travel ball coverage, there's always these breakout candidates who, aren't coming off the greatest high school seasons, but it's a springboard into the summer season.
Yeah, I feel like you see a lot of that in the Catholic Conference. You'll see sophomores that don't get much playing time because they're stacked rosters, and then all of a sudden they have a breakout summer, and you're like, oh, this guy throws 88, he's left-handed, and you're like, well, why didn't he play last year? But they have a lot of depth on those Catholic Conference teams. Speaking of breakouts, I wanted to talk about Franklin freshman Ethan Edmonds, who had a huge game against King Philip, and a really well-established program that's made some deep runs in the tournament. Tell us about his game, and have you noticed you don't see as much of that on the prep side? You don't see as many freshmen. I mean, Salisbury has a really good freshman this year, Salisbury School, but other than that, I can't think of too many that are getting in the lineup, that early. Have you noticed any others in the MIAA? And tell us about Ethan Edmonds' day.
Yeah, I mean, Ethan Edmonds, I think it was his debut in the first game of the season, grand slam and a 3-run homer, 8 RBI day against King Philip. I mean, you can't ask for better, really.
Crazy.
Just video game numbers.
Yeah.
I think, I haven't got my eyes on Franklin yet this year, but just, look his measurements. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, and he's a quarterback in football. So that seems like it'll translate pretty well into high school baseball.
Yeah, he's probably been through. He wasn't feeling the pressure making his debut on the baseball field.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that just, he's already got the physical tools, and it will translate. I haven't really picked up on, other freshmen, but there are a lot of sophomores I've noticed kind of stepping up, whether, I was at BC High and CM yesterday. I was really impressed with Matt Duffy's stuff on the mound. Kind of got into some trouble in the 7th inning, but just lights out when he came in a pretty big jam in the earlier in the game.
And he's not related. I saw that name and I was like, he's not related to the St. Sebastian's coach, Matt. Because he would be at St. Sebastian's, I think, if he was his kid.
I would imagine, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
And even, we talked about him last year, Ryan Nikiforo at Millbury, who had a great freshman year and postseason run and led them to a title. He's one start this year, 6 innings, 7 Ks, only 2 earned runs. So pretty solid start for him. And Aiden Brackett at Chelmsford, he's a freshman catcher last year. He's hitting .467 to start the year, OPS over 1.3, which is another kind of insane number, already 3 doubles, 5 RBIs. So those sophomores kind of stepping up, and, it's still early. I'm sure they're, freshmen that I've kind of missed through the cracks here, but
they tend to come on later, second half of the season once they're a little bit more comfortable. Aiden Brackett, though, I remember that name from last year. He's one of their better players as a freshman, and obviously continuing that this year. I know we've heard from some Middlesex League, fans that don't think we give the league enough credit. And again, they have some strong, you got in your 5 takeaways last week, the competitive start to the season. Reading made a deep run in the state tournament last year. A couple other, they have Wakefield, Woburn, Winchester, Melrose, Stoneham have all been in the tournament pretty consistently. How is that shaking out in 2026?
Yeah, the team I've circled, immediately is Winchester. They're 5-0, and I think it was a pretty statement win over Wellesley in the season opener. And it was I believe it was a pitching duel kind of early on, and then they kind of got to Wellesley's bullpen, and Brady Urig's had a good start to the year. Brendan Bach, he had a go-ahead 2-run double in that Wellesley win. But you go into 11-3 win over Wilmington. They kept it going this weekend. I believe they played Stoneham. So just kind of early on looking like the class of the Middlesex League. But you mentioned Reading, who, they're 2-0. Isaac Robinson's had a 2-run homer against Belmont the other day. They're obviously going to be in the mix again. Lexington's had a strong offensive output so far. They're also undefeated. Wakefield, they had a big game from Mike Anacopoulos the other day. So a lot of those teams getting out to strong starts, and also challenging to be among those best public schools.
Yeah, that now it's probably time for us to do the Brady Bumilla discussion. Obviously, he's been the biggest name in the MIAA so far this season. He came out that first appearance. And he was hitting 100 miles an hour on the radar gun. There were a million radar guns behind the backstop watching him. It was all over social media. I think the Globe did a story on it. We have him in our spring magazine. We had him on the cover last year in the spring. So it's been pretty awesome to see, to be honest, because we had Joe Breen, his Bishop Fee coach, on last spring. And it just, it wasn't so much frustrating, but it was like, man, it's all there for this kid if he can just stay healthy. He went through some elbow stuff last year, didn't end up pitching much in the spring or summer. And it was just, are we ever going to see how good this kid can be if he stays healthy? And now here he is, 100 miles an hour. He's doing a lot of those 3 innings, 8 strikeouts, a couple hit batsmen. But it's all starting to come together. We're starting to see, what we've been waiting for, coming off a huge basketball season too. And so he just seems like he's in a good place right now. What have you seen from him either on social media or, like the rest of us?
Yeah, I remember last year kind of coming in and, we had the Bishop Fee cover story, Joe Breen on the podcast, and it was, looking out for Brody Bumilla, and then, doesn't really get to pitch much last year, and kind of a bummer there. But then the hype kind of resparks during the basketball season when, Brody Bumilla is dropping 45, 30, 20 rebounds, averaging 40 rebounds, 40 points, 20 rebounds. And, not much of a shooter, but I think he hit a huge 3 in the state title game. And it was a crazy run. And that felt like that the hype kind of got going like everywhere else.
Yeah.
Like nationally, like all of a sudden, like, obviously Baseball America is probably well aware of him. It's kind of their job with the prospects, but it seems like the hype and the coverage has just kind of taken off even more. And, his early stats, like you mentioned, I think he's thrown 3 games so far. I think he's his last 2, he went 3 innings, and it's, I think the last one was like faced 10 batters, struck out 9, hit 1. I don't think he's, at least his last 2 starts, he hasn't given up a hit, only one unearned run, couple hit batsmen. But yeah, hitting triple digits on the radar gun, a lot of fastballs. I believe it's his changeup that's been coming along, but I think for the most part in the games I've only seen the highlights on social. I haven't been able to see Fee so far, but I think it's been a lot of fastballs. And it's like you mentioned, just seeing if you just like have like, obviously in the video you're watching him, but then you watch enough times, you start to notice things in the crowd. And you're like, holy crap, that is like 25 radar guns in the crowd just watching him. So I'm sure he's a very popular phone call right now.
Yeah, no. And what I get a kick out of too is how many guys are swinging at, everything that he, like it seems like the mandate from the coaches is like, hey, he's throwing 100 miles an hour. You may never get a chance to hit against somebody who's throwing 100 miles an hour again. Like swing the bat. Don't sit there and try to take a walk.
Take your chances, right?
Yeah.
But even the getting hit by 98, 99, 140 degree day. Oh, that I don't envy that.
I know.
I do not envy that.
I respect the aggressiveness. The guy's getting in there trying to hit when, like you say, misses. It seems like there's one hit batsman a game or so, and you're just like, man, these guys aren't bailing on the pitches. That's good.
Yeah.
And like people have asked us, and I just moved them up to number 1 on our MLB draft prospects list for because it's like if you're 6'9" and you throw 100 miles, he's getting clocked at 100 miles an hour. It's like the scouts don't need to see his ERA. They don't need to see like him, lead a team deep into the state tournament. If you're 6'9" and you're throwing 100 miles an hour, you're a first round prospect. Yeah,
you just look at the tools instantly and add in that he's a lefty, and I feel like you don't really see a lot of lefties with those tools early on like he does. It's I think I read in the Athletic the other day, I think they have him up to like 45 in their overall. And like Baseball America has him really high among high school prospects, and I think was he the number 6 lefty? He's up there for the lefties, and like you said, the stats are kind of secondary. You just see the tools, and teams probably just want to get their hands on him and get him into their system.
Yeah. I don't think any scouts are like, well, he just hit a batter here. Let me cross his name off the list. They're like, we could develop a lot of things. We can't develop a 100 mile an hour fastball from a left-handed pitcher. So,
and even Texas has got to be licking their chops too, because there will be a decision to be made when it comes to the draft in college. But either way, it's somebody's getting a fine player.
Yeah, and Texas can pay him now too, which it used to be a pretty simple equation. Like, college, say it's $75,000 a year out of state to Texas. It's $300,000 to go there for 4 years. They'll pay him $2.5 million if they draft him in the first round. Like that's an easy decision. Now Texas can be like, we can afford to give you whatever it is, $500,000 a year. Probably not that much for one pitcher, but that does change the equation a little bit. Yeah. I'm not as dialed into the numbers that the SEC schools are paying baseball prospects, but I would imagine it's a little bit different than it was maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, you've actually been out to quite a few, or a couple games so far, or a few games so far this season. What are your first impressions? What's kind of stuck out to you from what you've seen in person?
So I've been to 2 so far this year. Both were Catholic Conference matchups. So hoping the schedules work out where I can get to some public schools in the near future. But the biggest thing that I've noticed is kind of just how competitive it is, and CM versus BC High is a good matchup, and St. John's Shrewsbury and St. John's Prep is a good matchup. But I feel like the last 2 years doing this in early season games, even if it's a on paper good matchup, usually if someone's up early, they're pulling away, and it's kind of a non-competitive the rest of the way. But both these games so far, it's been in it to the very end. St. John's Shrewsbury had a chance to tie it. They had it was bases loaded maybe with 2 outs in the bottom of the 7th, and fly out ends it. But St. John's Prep was sweating there. They changed pitchers twice in the final inning. It was just making them sweat towards, and it was a similar story with CM last night in BC High. They're down, I believe it was 7-3 coming into the top of the 7th, and all of a sudden it's 7-5, and you got multiple runners on base, and it's holy crap, can we induce a double play? And Matt Duffy induces the double play, but again, it's never in it, or never out of it until it's actually over so far. And that's kind of been like I said, usually especially early in the season. And I know it's different, you know, when these teams are this good, but early in the season, it feels like that's one where, like, you know, someone pulls away and it's kind of pack it in.
Yeah. Usually you see the 10-run rule a lot more in the beginning of the season than you do at the end. But yeah, that's and it's been fun to follow those Catholic school matchups that you've been covering. All right, last thing for you, teams that you kind of on your list of teams that you want to see over the next month, or players. Obviously, we just talked about Brody Bumilla. I think everybody would like to get out and see him at some point this spring. Any other teams or players that are on your list?
Yeah, you know, obviously Brody Bumilla for one. Luke Joyce, we've talked about the last few years. Aiden Murphy at Weston, good two-way prospect for them. And Weston's had a solid start, I believe. As far as teams, I'm interested to see if Taunton can, you know, just keep kind of dominating here at 6-0, and, you know, St. John Shrewsbury, the bounce back ability, and CM as a team, I'm really interested to see if they keep it up. But one team I'm really curious about is Natick. I had them, I think, 10th coming into the year. They're in the hunt now, just with the way things have shuffled around them. But I think they're 4-0, 5-0 atop their division in the Bay State Conference. Thurston Kiefer's a good player for them. Henry Kinchel has been swinging a productive bat. And their team that I think it was 2 seasons ago only won 3 games. Last year, I believe they won 14. And then, you know, this year it's kind of a pretty big senior class that came back, and it seems like, you know, might be their time to make a move. So Natick's one for sure that I have circled and hopefully can get out to soon.
Nice. That sounds like a good list. Let's just kind of review your coverage, just so when people are looking for MIAA stories, they kind of know what's coming from you. So every Monday is power rankings. Yep. You do top 10 power rankings, ranking the 10 schools and giving info on each of the 10 schools. Friday is your MIAA peak performers. Yep. So that's 10 players over the last week who really stood out with individual performances. You do an MIAA game of the week, so that isn't a fixed day. That could be it.
Yeah, a lot of games are like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There are a couple that are, you know, Tuesday, Thursday, but like the you know, usually that'll be a probably earlier in the week type of thing, whether it's Monday or Wednesday.
Yeah. And then the 5 takeaways, that's a Thursday story.
Yep. Kind of just a little kind of what we learned, or, you know, trends that we're noticing over the last week or so. Nice.
All right. So definitely stay tuned on those days to see Pat's great MIAA coverage. Netting professionals and Stadionic are proud to be the official netting partners of the Cape Cod League and the New England Collegiate Baseball League. Together, netting professionals and Stadionic are in the sports facility business of improving athletic programs, one facility at a time. Netting Professionals designs, fabricates, and installs custom netting, wall padding, windscreens, batting practice equipment, and more for high schools, colleges, commercial facilities, and stadiums across the United States. Stadionic complements that work by helping programs plan, build, and elevate sports facilities with a focus on performance, safety, and long-term value, all while delivering high-quality products and outstanding service throughout the New England area. Remember, when it comes to netting and building iconic sports facilities, it's Netting Professionals and Stadionic.
3 up, 3 down.
Welcome back to 3 Up, 3 Down, where I have 3 questions prepared for each of our panelists. And we're doing memorable plays today. So it'll all become clear in a moment what I'm talking about. But no trivia yet, Pat. I know Pat licks his chops because he's the king of trivia around here. But we might do that on the next episode. But for now, we'll start with you, Dan. And question 1, what's the most memorable or greatest strikeout in baseball history? Now, I'm looking at this from a pitcher's standpoint, not so much the failure of the hitter, although I suppose you can take the question in any direction you like. But now I've given you time to think about it. But the greatest or most memorable strikeout, punch-out in Major League history.
The one I really like is Roger Clemens' 20th strikeout in, I think it was 86.
Sure. 86.
But I read a whole column. Dan Shaughnessy, did you ever read that column by Dan Shaughnessy? He was like, I think he was covering something else, maybe a Celtics game. And then Clemens had like 12 strikeouts in 4 innings. And he ended up like driving across town, getting over to Fenway.
Yeah, it was a rainy early season day in Fenway, and the park was like half full.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was a called third strike for the 20th, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
My favorite personally, Brad Lidge had a strikeout to end the game in the 2008 World Series that the Phillies won.
Sure.
And Tug McGraw had one in the 1980 World Series that the Phillies won. So I've seen those like a million times growing up. But
Tug McGraw lost his mind after he, as you would.
He threw his glove like a mile high after he did it.
Yeah, those are excellent ones. Pat, what do you got?
I don't know where they shake out in the lores of MLB history, but as far as memorable ones for me, Chris Sale striking out, I think it was Manny Machado in the 2018 World Series, and that wasn't some massive underdog story, but you have one of the best pitchers of his era against one of the best players of his era, plus the baggage with Manny Machado and the Red Sox, and kind of making him look foolish on the final pitch to clinch the World Series was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was also sort of, I don't know if redemption's the right word for Sale, but I think that was his only appearance in the series. Is that possible? Because he was hurt. And I remember them bringing him back.
Yeah.
I can look that up, obviously. That was 2018. Yeah.
No, that was, and David Price kind of had the same thing happen. What year was that? He was like, obviously a starting pitcher for them for a long time, but then he was only available as a reliever in one of their postseason runs.
Yeah, that was like, he was pretty solid that postseason. It was kind of, putting to rest some demons from the horrible start he had here.
Yeah.
The other one that sticks out is Clay Buchholz, no-hitter. I think it was his second career game, maybe, but it was at Fenway, called third strike on a pretty sweet curveball. Don Orsillo had a great call. And I was a big Clay Buchholz guy growing up, so that was always fun.
Excellent. By the way, when Clemens struck out 20, he might have been stuck on 19, if not for the fact that Don Baylor dropped a foul ball, and Clemens ended up striking out the batter on that play. Yeah, if Baylor could just field, then he might have only had 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It was Manny Machado in 2018, Pat. And I don't have any further information on that. So that was useless, but okay, good. All right. Next question, Pat, we'll start with you on this. We're sticking with the theme here. What's the most memorable infielder play or greatest infielder play of all time? And there's one rule about this question. You are not allowed to say Derek Jeter's stupid flip to the catcher when he was inexplicably standing in the wrong place. But other than that, any infielder play, so it could be a double play, could be just an amazing stop and throw, it could be a catch. And Pat, we look to you.
I mean, the one that stands out immediately is the Derek Jeter run into the stands, but I always like to make fun of that one.
Yeah, because he stumbled over his own feet after he caught it.
He's had plenty of time to stop. But that's neither here nor there. Man, I might be out of my element on
you
this
can
one.
pass. You can pass.
I think I'll pass.
If you come up with another one as Dan is answering, then please just ring in. Dan, your thoughts?
So I'm probably thinking of this just because we just talked about Manny Machado, but there is, if you Google or plug his name into YouTube, there's a ground ball that's like right down the third baseline. It ends up, in foul territory behind the bag. And I don't know who's running to first because he basically fields it backhanded and kind of sidearm as he's falling into like the stands, throws it. And it takes forever for the ball to get to first, but he gets the guy out, and it's just a crazy play. It just popped up yesterday. I don't know if it was in my feed for some reason, probably will be now that we're talking about it, but yeah, I just saw it yesterday. So I was thinking about that play when you mentioned Manny Machado.
Yeah. When you watch plays like that, it's like, there's probably no other way he could have made that play. I mean, I guess you don't have a lot of choices, but you're like off balance. You can't, if you stop and try to set your footing and throw, you're going to be late. So it's like the equivalent of heaving a ball from half court in basketball or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. We move on to unless you have anything to add, Pat. You got one?
They're not like, they're low light plays.
Okay.
Like two low lights that are, they'll end up on not top 10 or whatever. I don't remember who it was, but whoever, making a pretty great play from short or second and just beat the umpire at first base.
Oh, I see that all the time.
I think it was last season, just an absolute laser into the guy's side of the guy's head, which obviously, glad he was okay. But that one pops up every now and then. It's really funny. And then the it was the Detroit perfect game. I think it was Galarraga was his name.
Yeah.
But the clear, missed put out at first base.
Should have been a perfect game.
Yeah, should have been a pretty routine put out, and then obviously now a low light.
Great. Last year, most memorable plays. Pat picks the most heartbreaking moment for a pitcher, and when an umpire gets maimed.
That one of the umpire getting drilled in the head. That people like put that, it'll be like after a terrible Eagles loss, people will be like Jalen Hurts trying to find AJ Brown on Sunday, and it'll be like the shortstop drilling the umpire in the head.
God, you gotta feel bad for the ump. What you picture him getting home that night, and his wife saying, "How was the game, honey?" It's like, boy,
he did everything right.
I know.
He's looking at the play.
Yeah, right. Okay, we move on, and Dan, you can go first on this one. Again, sticking with the theme, the most memorable throw from an outfielder that you can remember in Major League history. The most memorable throw is probably what do we call it? Outfield assist.
Yeah.
Dan, your thoughts on that?
So didn't I think it's Bo Jackson throwing someone out at first from left field.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like he's playing shallow and he charges it, but it's like a freaking rope all the way to first base, get somebody out.
That's a good one.
That one sticks in my head.
Okay. I was gonna say it was Sean Casey he threw out, but that was somebody else that threw out Sean Casey at first base
I think that was from right field, or was that from left field?
I think that one might have been from left field, because there are plenty of players that have been thrown out from right field. You see it every now and again.
Oh yeah.
But Casey stumbled out of the batter's box and he does not move quickly.
No.
And that was the ultimate indignity. But that was not the Bo Jackson one. Anyway, Pat, your thoughts, greatest throw.
Man, again, nothing specific that I can recall just as far as the historical, but I always just remember being like, even recently this year, Willie Abreu had a throw from right that was like anybody else shouldn't be close, and it was a close play that I think they reviewed, but just whether it's that or I remember like Mookie had a hose for a little while, or Jackie Bradley Jr. too. But I mean the low lights now that like if I want to lean into the low lights bit, Roman Anthony's pool noodle at the moment.
Oh man,
and his horrible footwork, but.
Mookie Betts is a good one. He's had a few. The one that I remember was when he was with the Red Sox. It might have been in the playoffs against the Rays. I'm not sure, but someone was trying to stretch a double into a triple, and Mookie guns him out, and you could read his lips as he gets up to talk to the third base coach. The guy was thrown out. He goes, "Who was that? Mookie?" Like. I mean, in the moment, he probably didn't realize who had made the throw, but he realized it was Mookie. It was kind of like, who was that masked man?
And it's amazing. Like, he's a Gold Glove shortstop now.
I know. And a pretty good bowler, I'm told.
Yes.
What was the one with Bo Jackson in 1989? Let's see. No, this is a different throw. He's got more than one.
Oh,
anyways. Yeah. And you both left out Dave Parker in the All-Star game, which was considered one of the greatest. And then I'll just to again prove how old I am, I'll mention one more. And there was a World Series that involved the Dodgers and the A's in the 70s. It was probably 74. I might be getting that wrong, but it could have been 73. But anyway, there was a guy tagging at third to score on what would have been a sacrifice fly, and the ball was clearly headed right toward the center fielder, but the right fielder was this big lumbering guy named Joe Ferguson. He was like, he could hit for power. He could run extremely slow, but he could throw. And at the last minute, Joe Ferguson appears in the frame and basically steals the ball from his own center fielder and throws the guy out at the plate. And, whether that was true, like, would he not have run if he knew Ferguson was going to catch it? Who knows? But YouTube that one, everyone. Yeah. And good job, both you guys.
Hey,
on 3 up, 2 down. Even you, Pat, you came up with
another low light.
Go ahead.
Another not top 10 would be Manny cutting off.
Oh yeah.
I think it was Damon's throw. But yeah, just diving out of the frame, just diving for it and cutting it off.
The weird thing is Manny made a pretty good catch on that play.
Yeah.
But why? I
know. Yeah.
But then again, the throw was pretty weak. That was like a bad news bears moment. That was ridiculous. Again, nice job, guys. And actually wrap things up.
Well, apologies to Vladimir Guerrero Sr. And the Hawk Andre Dawson for not incorporating him into the outfield putout. Thanks for listening to the Base Path Podcast. Thanks to Pat Donnelly for joining us. Thanks to our producer, David Yaz. Subscribe to the Base Path Podcast on your preferred platform. The Base Path Podcast is a Siemens Media production.